During a recent conference, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, following the fact that Republicans have succeeded in stripping women's reproductive rights away from them, says that the country actually needs strong Republicans. She has said this multiple times, okay? Not once, not twice, but actually several times. She has been on the record as the Democratic leadership calling for a strong Republican Party. And so how is the corporate media covering that? Are they critical of the fact that Democratic leadership, including Nancy Pelosi, have only enabled and emboldened right-wing fascists in this country? They've actually decided to give her cookies. So first, let me begin with Margaret Brennan. It's a very short clip, but it gives you a sense of how they typically frame questions related to Nancy Pelosi and her leadership.
You have been fighting for decades on this issue.
No, Nancy Pelosi has not been fighting for decades on the issue of reproductive rights. And I wanna make my case. I wanna provide the receipts for that. The most recent receipt, by the way, is the fact that she is out there shilling for a Democratic incumbent by the name of Henry Cuellar in Texas. And Henry Cuellar, as some of you might already know, is the only Democrat who voted against codifying reproductive rights for women in the House. Why is she endorsing and shilling for Representative Cuellar, who, by the way, just had his home and office raided by the FBI, when she could be endorsing the progressive candidate in the race who does in fact want to codify Roe v. Wade or codify reproductive rights? Now, The Hill also gave her some cookies recently in a piece titled, and by the way, this is not an op-ed. This is supposed to be straight news reporting. Abortion Fight Could Cap Pelosi's Long Historic Career, written by Mike Lillis. Okay, so far I see some red flags. Seems like this is a little disconnected from reality, but who knows? Sometimes headlines are bad, but the body of the piece is not so bad. And then you read it. Pelosi, the nation's first female speaker, is well versed in the divisive fight, having been a champion of women's reproductive rights since long before her arrival in Congress more than 3 decades ago. The piece continues with, last week's blockbuster news that the Supreme Court is poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, the landmark 1973 ruling that legalized abortion nationwide. Pelosi is a natural fit to play a leading role in the Democratic opposition to the potential decision heading into November's midterm elections, where Democrats are hoping the issue will drive abortion rights supporters to participate. Lillis also writes, quote, the protections provided by Roe remain overwhelmingly popular across the country, and some political experts predicted the Democrats' plan to shine a bright light on the issue and have Pelosi take a lead on the messaging will pay dividends in the polls. Spoiler alert, it will not pay dividends in the polls. Nancy Pelosi was just at a conference specifically saying that the country needs strong Republicans. The same party that has stripped women of their reproductive rights. And to be quite honest with you, she actually has a pretty long streak of failure when it comes to women's reproductive rights. Let me give you one of those examples right now. To save the Affordable Care Act, Nancy Pelosi had to give in to abortion opponents in her party and allow them to propose tight restrictions barring any insurance plan that is purchased with government subsidies from covering abortion. This is, by the way, a piece that was written in 2009, okay, when the debates over the Affordable Care Act were taking place. So rather than use her expertise, remember, she's supposed to be a master tactician. What she did was cave to the conservative elements within her own party and essentially ensure that there were very few protections, if any, for women and their reproductive rights in the Affordable Care Act. In fact, she got a lot of criticism about this from women's rights activists. One who said this, if enacted, this amendment will be the greatest restriction of a woman's right to choose to pass in our careers, said Representative, Deanna DeGette. So this is actually a lawmaker at the time, a Democrat from Colorado, one of the lawmakers who actually left Pelosi's office angry after she tried to persuade Pelosi to not cave in to allegedly conservatives in the Democratic Party. But let me also be clear about something. It's being reported, or it was reported, that it was Democrats that kind of persuaded her to have these anti-abortion measures in the Affordable Care Act. In reality, she caved immediately after meeting with the Pope. And the Pope urged her to strip the Affordable Care Act of these types of protections to ensure that there wasn't any support for women seeking abortions. Yeah. And she did exactly that.
I mean, that's insane. Who cares what the Pope has to say? He's not American. I don't know if you know that. And we're not a theocracy. We're not supposed to establish a religion. And today she's bragging about, oh no, Joe Manchin, I can convince him because he's Italian and Catholic. Well, okay, where is it then? Why didn't you convince him on voting rights or $15 minimum wage or Roe? Why haven't you convinced him on anything? Guys, the proof's in the pudding. There are verifiable facts in the world. So the nonstop ass kissing by reporters like this. She said we need more Nancy Pelosi. To do what? To do what? Okay, show me a major piece of legislation she's passed in her 3 decades. There's only one, Romney Care. Yeah, that's what Obamacare was called because before they called it Obamacare, it was Mitt Romney who passed it in Massachusetts when he was the governor there. It was written by a right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation. So her only major legislative accomplishment in 3 decades is passing a piece of legislation that, by the way, mandates that you buy from private health insurance companies who are the Democratic Party's donors, written by a right-wing think tank. These are all verifiable facts. But in Washington, they go, no, her not passing anything except that one right-wing piece of legislation. Yes, the right wing has moved further right, and now they don't like Obamacare, but it was originally their idea. And so that's her major accomplishment. And what has she done on Roe? Nothing. We just lost Roe on her watch. And when you ask, hey, what's your plan to convince Manchin? We showed you the quote earlier in the show. She's like, we're Italian, we're Catholic, there's a pension, there's mine workers. No answer at all, totally incoherent babble. So look, you have eyes and you have ears. You can tell who's right and who's wrong. Then the question is, why does the mainstream media, filled with reporters and journalists, write nonsense like this, especially on a day when she's saying, oh, I wish the Republicans were stronger. I think I'm gonna persuade them to be pro-choice. You'd have to be a lunatic to believe that.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we're critical of Nancy Pelosi. Sometimes I feel like it's a little bit unfair, not necessarily to Pelosi, but because we tend to hyper focus on her. And the fact of the matter is there's Democratic leadership in the Senate. And I think Chuck Schumer deserves a ton of heat, a ton of backlash for his failures as well. Now, I think Chuck Schumer is a little smarter in that he avoids going to conferences to call for a strong Republican Party. Like, how stupid do you have to be to say that, especially right now? But Chuck Schumer is the person who's supposed to essentially ensure that Democratic senators fall in line. And I mean, he's just he's so impotent. Like, it's so sad. It really is sad to see.
Yeah.
And so it's not just Pelosi, it's Democratic leadership overall. And it's not just because they happen to be weak politicians. No, they're paid to be weak, right? When it comes down to it, if they have to choose between serving the best interests of their constituents or carrying out the priorities of their donors, they're gonna go with their donors every time. And we've seen that play out over and over and over again. There's many different cases I can point to having nothing to do with reproductive rights that prove it. When it comes to defense spending, there is no problem. There isn't any Democrat, with the exception of like Bernie Sanders in the Senate, who's willing to go against authorizing the National Defense Authorization Act. When it comes to funding for Ukraine's military, there's a lot of agreement there. In fact, there's a story later in the show about how Joe Biden has agreed to basically put COVID-related funding aside, put it on the back burner, meaning it'll never pass, so he can prioritize tens of billions of dollars in funding for Ukraine. I'm sure that'll play out real well for you, Biden, communicating to the American people that a foreign country takes priority over your own people. Good luck with that. We'll see how that plays out. But I'm sure the Democrats and the corporate media will blame progressives for their failure because Why? Is it progressives that decided to abandon the American people, or is it the mainstream Democratic Party?
Okay, so I'm gonna read you a number of headlines from 2017. The Cut had this headline: Pelosi, Democrats shouldn't focus on abortion access. Washington Post.
Winner.
Democratic candidates should not, Pelosi, Democratic candidates should not be forced to toe the party line on abortion. I'm gonna read you one last one, but there's dozens of these. Pelosi, of course, Dems can be against abortion. No, she has not been a champion of abortion access. She's been the exact opposite. As recently as 2017, telling everybody it's okay, nobody cares about abortion. And in fact, she, in some of her previous comments, said it's hurting the party to focus on abortion. And she opens with welcome arms abortion opponents, including right now, today, she's campaigning for Henry Cuellar, who is an abortion opponent. And by the way, voted to defund Planned Parenthood. She's trying to get him reelected so he can defund Planned Parenthood. Those are facts and you could all look it up. But in Washington, they say she is the true champion of women's rights and fighting for abortion access. I mean, it's as close to a bald-faced lie as you can get. Now, to Schumer, Anna, look, we beat up on Schumer all the time. In fact, in this case, he deserves even more blame. So Pelosi is rhetorically horrific, okay? Just like literally saying, I would like to help the Republicans. But Schumer's the one actually helping them with his actions. He's not even gonna bring up the filibuster for a vote again. So the voting on abortion right now in the Senate is a joke. They know they don't have 60 votes. They won't even vote on the thing that could get them to 60 votes. I'm sorry, they can get him a win with 50 votes, which is getting rid of the filibuster. And he's not even doing it. So all of this, the Democrats are nothing but theater. They're not helping you. They have a 20-year history. These exact leaders, Schumer, Pelosi, Biden, have a history of not helping you. And the corporate media has a history of lying to do marketing on their behalf. You can look up the actual facts. And so, and Anna, the reason why I get most animated about Pelosi, if that's the case, I would argue that I get quite animated about Biden and Schumer too, is that that's where the mainstream media does the most gaslighting. Like no one's ever called Schumer. No one's ever called Schumer a master legislator. They think he's important as a leader. They have to kiss his ass. That's not your job as a reporter. Your job as a reporter is to challenge power, you losers, okay? You pathetic, absolutely pathetic so-called press corps in Washington. But for Pelosi, they go out of their way. They're like, oh, just a brilliant legislator. Okay, just stop lying. The gaslighting is just unbearable.